Welcome to Holding Space. I'm Dr. Christopher Barker. I'm a New Jersey licensed psychologist. And today I have with me Chris Fields, who has a background in NLP, neuro linguistic programming, which is really interesting. He's a former Marine, former private investigator, and he's a relationship coach. And that makes for a really interesting background for relationship coaching. Whatever you can tell us to fill us in. I mean, the ideas about understanding subconscious patterns driving connection and conflict. That's something that I've been working on also. So that's of great interest to me, and I'm sure it will be to our listeners also. Tell us more about what you do and your philosophy for doing it.
All right. So long story short, I'll be 40 this year. So I started off in the Marine Corps at 17. So it's been a minute. As a matter of fact, my child's in boot camp right now. So it's kind of crazy how quickly time passes. But so from there, so I'm from Savannah, Georgia, really the outskirts. And you culturally wise, especially the outskirts, you kind of grow up thinking one way and not being really exposed to any other cultures. So going into the Marine Corps itself was a culture shock in a very good way, though, because I got to, put my life in the hands of other people that I really had no idea of. And so it really not just the traveling part, which is an amazing benefit of the military, but just meeting people from all over the U.S. was a eye opener and amazing. And so that's carried throughout my life and career. But I got out and I went into private investigative work and simultaneously I was studying psychology and my criminal justice degree. And I started off to the side learning neuro linguistic programming, which I found very beneficial. I know a lot of psychologists and psychiatrists either call it pseudoscience or they openly add it to their practice. So it's kind of hit or miss, I guess, in terms of uh, medical license. But I started learning at the same time, tested it out because I'm a skeptic by nature. So it became very beneficial. And then it worked. I worked as a private investigator for 8 years. So you're meeting a lot of different types of people and a lot of different types of cases. But for the most part, the cases were in the PI world, a dime a dozen is the domestic cases, the infidelity and custody. And it really wasn't my forte per se, but when you're trying to scrape together money to pay bills as a new private investigator, you definitely do a lot of those cases or insurance surveillance. So I found NLP to be very beneficial, not just interviewing subjects, but also in like a more therapeutic way to, the spouse that thinks her husband's cheating, etc. So it kind of migrated over a few years into becoming a coach because in most cases I was finding that people were creating stories in their mind based off of facts here and there that though they the correlation was not causation. So though they correlated in a sense, the little facts they would pick up from their relationship or the indifferences, they didn't necessarily go together. And it took a third party, an unbiased party that had no emotions in the game, aka me, to separate fact and fiction. So, and how that works, it works very great when I migrated into relationship coaching because I can separate the difference. I don't have any emotions involved. And then not only that, I can trace the source back, which obviously I did a lot as a PI, trace the source back to, why is this triggering event keep popping up in your relationship specifically? More cases than none is typically revolves around childhood or childhood trauma. I found in most cases. So um, that's how it kind of turned from one thing into the other. So I've been doing this a few years and really got serious about it in the last year. It was just here and there up until now, but I found it a lot more rewarding to be more preventative in terms of helping people's relationship than, after the fact trying to catch someone for court proceedings or whatever. So it's definitely more rewarding. I'm a lot more motivated about it.
You don't hear NLP talked about as much anymore recently. I know it was kind of a big deal when I was first being trained, but um, so a lot of people may not know about it. Could you tell us a little more about your linguistic programming?
Yes, and it's hard to almost give an elevator speech on, but to simplify, NLP or neuro-linguistic programming, it helps identify and change behaviors and patterns that are typically subconscious with yourself. And as you know, our subconscious mind is working at 95% capacity at all times, and our conscious level is at about 5%. So I think don't quote me on the numbers, but I think our subconscious or unconscious mind, whatever you want to call it, is working 500,000 times more than your conscious mind. So our patterns and things like I was mentioning, things are triggered by the smell of a cologne or perfume or a song. It's all anchors, and that's what we call in NLP is anchors. A trigger is what commonly known as, but how these you know build those patterns, how those patterns create emotions in your body without you even trying, it can be in the belief of NLP can be rewired, essentially. So, in a nutshell, I hope that definition makes sense. But very, very unique stuff.
Yeah, no, it really is. And I know there's a lot about like directions that people are looking and things like that that you can sort of like track where they are. Um, but I know that you're absolutely right about this conscious. It is working overtime, and definitely it's guiding a lot. So, like when you're working with couples, how do you generally do it?
So, first and foremost, um, no two people, and especially no relationship, is alike to a specific to mirror each other. So the first thing I'm going to do is do a few assessments and basically just a few conversations, in-depth conversations to figure out who the person is. For one, I'm a stranger coming into your marriage or relationship, so that people already have a guard up, and rightfully so. So I have to break down that barrier and really get to know the person. And then when I apply the two people together, then I can see maybe there's a mismatch. And I'm not talking about in terms of having a long term relationship, just a mismatch in how you handle communication or arguments or, high value things in your life, how you handle it different than the other person. Or maybe, if you take a child that grew up in poverty versus a child that grew up very wealthy, your system of doing things are different. It does not mean you can't be in a relationship together, but sometimes your frame in which you look at things are different. So basically, I don't separate per se, but I figure out each person on an individual level and then combine them, then find the issues, the root cause, and then start to trace it back. And once it's traced back, which it takes a few sessions, then we can build a step forward. So here's the program forward. Here's the things you need to do daily or monthly. And here's the conversations you have. Here's the changes you need to make to be from point A to point B in a set amount of time.
Mhm. Um, how long does it usually take to do this sort of therapy, and what uh, what kinds of results have you had? I mean, I'm calling it
So
therapy, but it really kind of is.
yeah, yeah. So coaching in, co- in comparison to therapy's kind of long term. Let's do and coaching tries to compact it into something that says let's get from A to Z in X amount of time, and the best average amount of time is 3 months, 90 days. And that's one meeting a week is what I do. I do have an 8 week program, 8 meetings, but to be honest, if it's something especially to a higher severity, it's gonna take a good 3 months to get some foundation started. So about 12 1 hour meetings is this average.
Something I'm writing about now is how relational trauma impacts future relationships. I found that people who have complex trauma, a number of issues in childhood, or it can be later on in adulthood, but um, it doesn't have to be trauma, like you're living in a combat zone. It can be that you never attached properly to a caregiver, or that the caregiver was, I guess, really inconsistent in how they were attaching. So if you've got somebody who has a background, for instance, of um, their father was out of the house, the mother was very emotionally unstable, and they develop a tendency to be hypervigilant. They're always waiting for the next other shoe to drop. When they get into a relationship, frequently you will find that they expect trouble and they're waiting for it. And every little sign that comes across the board is like, what does that mean? And it's kind of like I sometimes refer to it as okay, the past is rewriting the present, and the future is unwritten completely. So what you're living in is old patterns.
Yes, that is very common, by the way. Self sabotage 101. And it's very unfortunate because people are not always, actually, most times, people are not aware that they're ruining their own happiness. And I just see it so much. And I can't even say that I've never done it myself, but I'm more self-aware these days, but maybe in the earlier years. But I see it a lot. They are expecting the trauma, so they subconsciously find a way to create it. And you'll notice you can look at the patterns in relationships or marriages that if everything is going well, it's almost a matter of time before there's a created event that will absolutely destroy everything. And it's like clockwork, and it's very unfortunate. Definitely fixable. But yes, that ties into an individual's attachment pattern, and attachment patterns are very significant when it comes to relationships because everyone is different due to how they were loved or not loved in their childhood. And to add to that, a few polls are taken in studies, and they were asked if would you rather have a parent alive that was not there or have a parent that had passed away, and significantly, people answered they rather the parent had been dead because if you have a parent that's present and not showing love or appreciation, it's more traumatic for a person.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, if someone has gone, then there's obviously an excuse for them not being there. But someone who, and I see this a lot also. People saying that, well, why isn't my mother being a mother to me, or why isn't my father being a father? And we have ideas about how these things are supposed to go, but they don't always match with experience. And sometimes the patterns that we come to expect are just they're based on something else. They're based on what we read in books. They're based on what we see in movies. They're based on our ideals. But in terms of do they actually manifest that way? A lot of times not. And I think probably the self sabotage is a way of fulfilling that prophecy of this is how it's always going to work out.
Right. And you mentioned you mentioned basically, correct me if I'm wrong, but kind of viewing other people's relationships, say on social media, which would be pretty common, and creating that image that you think you need to aspire to be. I can say I see that a lot as well, and almost every time because I've worked cases where I'm behind the scenes of a family on paper and on social media. They're the perfect family, the perfect house, perfect white picket fence outside, the pet pet dog at home, and almost always they have more skeletons in their closet than anyone. It's a lot of um, communication issues or infidelity or uh, financial issues that's going on that people are not aware of. However, they're comparing their current life to something that is not even real. And I see that a lot. And it's very dangerous for, self growth and, just making yourself and your relationship better in general. But yes, the lack of parenting is crucial, and you can't do it once you're an adult. You can't go back and change that. All you can do is make sure you do not complete the same pattern or make it keep going for your family and your children. Stop it, make it end with you. So
I like that. Make it end with you. You also mentioned something in your bio about how trust breaks down. How do you see that happening in relationships?
a lot. It's not uncommon for that's kind of a vague question, I guess. So I'm trying to pinpoint to what happens exactly. I think it was probably more phrased toward infidelity and trust, but trust breaks down. Relationships get when you get after the butterfly period, which is a real thing. I think generally, which is about a year to 2 years. It's hard to put a real number on that, though. Um, it- Relationships and marriages, they tend to have their complacency, and just because the complacency happens doesn't mean your partner doesn't like you anymore or love you anymore. Doesn't mean they're, seeking attention elsewhere. But I will say that if we're, veering toward like infidelity and trust, a lot of people don't like to face the fact that though if you were cheated on by your partner, though that is not your decision and you're not at fault, but did you contribute to it? Yes, in most cases. It's because one of the number one reasons someone creates infidelity, cheats, or finds love elsewhere is because they're lacking in their current relationship. It may be something they're not currently aware of, or the person that gets cheated on is not currently aware they're not giving that to the other person. But there is something off there that creates the lack, and the person that creates the infidelity is seeking elsewhere that attention. And so, in most cases, especially people that want to work to build that trust back, it is definitely possible. And not only possible, people that repair after infidelity tend to be stronger than before. The chances of repairing are a lot less, though. But to build trust is be transparent, volunteer information. And I'm absolutely not saying to create trust is to go through your partner's phone. I think is very counterproductive and not healthy whatsoever. But be transparent, and if speaking, I guess, on the terms of infidelity, if you're having secret conversations with something that you cannot share with your partner, then it's cheating, whether it's physical or just emotional or mental or verbal. I mean, but I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, no, it did, and more so. And I imagine that that news that you might have been contributed somehow in this situation doesn't go over very well sometimes, but it I could see how it easily could happen. Um, yeah, both people bring their own pasts and their own needs into a relationship, and sometimes those needs are very different. And they can leave the one
Yeah,
partner
absolutely.
feeling isolated.
Yeah,
And if
definitely,
you're isolated, you're
definitely.
going to reach out for connection.
Yep. Not excusing it, but it does happen. Unfortunately, infidelity specifically is more common than we'd hope for.
Mm. I've worked with a couple recently that somewhere else in the greater tri-state metropolitan area, he said by way of preserving confidentiality, who the husband had an emotional affair with someone. It was entirely online. They never met, but there was some definite deep feeling involved. And the wife found out about it and proceeded to test him, push him. It felt like torture sometimes, but she just wanted to be sure she could trust. And how do you know that you can trust? Yeah, if everybody's being transparent, that's good. But what are some things to look for that you can actually believe?
So you can't. That's the unfortunate answer is you cannot know that you're going to trust. The transparency works, and then given the length of time that it happens, so you can be transparent for a week and then shut it off, and then we're back to square one. But months, I think I want to say the statistical numbers, which again is not completely accurate, but I think it's about a year to two to rebuild from infidelity, give or take. But it's because that pattern of the transparency and being involved with each other. And when I say being involved, you can be in a marriage and a relationship and not be involved with the other person. You have to intentionally be involved in that person's life and intentionally have conversations and wonder what's going on in their mind, from day to day. But rebuilding just takes time, and you're just gonna know. Unfortunately, there's no green check mark that says trust can be granted now. It's just a matter of work. I will say though, if the person that did wrong accepts it and says, "My bad, I want this, I want you in my relationship," that's a very good indicator that unfortunately it was a mistake, but they're owning up to it and they want to be with you. They don't want to continue the thing that's outside the marriage. So I definitely look for that.
Yeah. The continuing active interest. I guess how quickly one accepts that and how quickly one is able to build trust in that sort of depends on that person's background also.
Yes. I mean, you can't expect someone to accept your apology and move on right away. Of course, that is not realistic. However, I mean, you got to ask yourself, how long am I willing to torture this person? Because again, it's counterproductive and is dangerous because what you're essentially you if you're agreeing to work with this person past their fault, you want this to work out. But if you're also pushing away at the same time, then you're sabotaging yourself. And maybe that played into the whole infidelity thing to begin with. You don't know. But yeah, I will say you can't because essentially you're just creating a pattern of a toxic relationship. Deal with the issue and at a time. Deal with the issue at a time, and then wait. Wait, see if see if it pans out, and that's really all you can do. Once you accept that I'm not going to leave this partner, we're going to work on this and move on. Then you actually have to play part of moving on. You can't just you treat them as someone that messed up for the rest of their life. It will not work out. So zero success rate.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I've observed also. Also, the tendency to self-sabotage sometimes comes from one of the things I write about is shame and how people develop shame early in life based on parental relationships, early relationships, and when they just don't believe that they're worthy. So they kind of will do anything to prove that. And that becomes kind of, again, part of that subconscious driving wheel that is cranking all the time. It's like, I'll show you how bad I am.
Absolutely, and that's actually very significant, especially in relationship coaching, because once a root cause or causes is determined, that's something specifically would work on is limited beliefs of that person exactly, because you can fix your relationship issue, but if you don't fix how you think about yourself, that's just going to continue, and there will be more issues down the road. So that is actually very significant when it comes to self-sabotage and messing up relationships. Is if you don't feel like you're worthy of it, then the pattern will continue 100%.
That's great. Um, yeah, it's something to certainly be aware of and certainly something to address in your own therapy and change. If you had to leave us with some advice for couples and or relationships in general, and how would you go about building bridges and building trust back, building faith, communication? What's the most important things?
Communication, again, trust can be weighed best by time and consistency. Communication is you can you can learn communication all the time, but we really overcomplicate it. So to simplify, just speak to people is really it. If that's going to be your personal life, speak with them. Sometimes they might not want to speak. Guess what? You need to appreciate that actually because you're understanding this person more when you say, you know what, that's their off time. Let me chill out and speak to them in 30 minutes or later tonight or maybe even the next morning. But the best advice, I guess the best advice generally for any type of relationship issue I would say learn yourself first because a lot of people think that they know themselves well until they start diving deep and they're like, wow, that's actually created a problem my entire life and I was never aware. And, I include myself into that, and sometimes I'm like, wow, I never really paid attention to this one thing about me, but it's been consistent my entire life. I wonder how many things it's maybe messed up. But definitely do some self assessments, personality exams. They're never 100%, but if you can dig deep as much as you can about yourself, then you know what you have to provide to that other person, and you know how you're potentially going to react in situations, and maybe how to change that. So that would be it.
Yeah, know thyself, and anything that you can learn about yourself is certainly something that you can bring to that relationship. Also, being able to process things I've found when I've worked with relationships, that being able to process things and to say, I'm feeling this kind of way right now. And I you may have contributed to that by saying this or doing that, but being able to talk about it directly is certainly important and something that a lot of people just can't do. They sort of like hang back and either wait for proof or they test the other person to see if they're going to do it again, or they assume it's all the other person's fault. But being able to say, I'm feeling activated by what you said, or I'm feeling this right now. I wonder why, and being able to process it together.
Yes, definitely. That is very accurate. Mhm.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate you being here. We will be glad to see you again if you want to come back and talk about more things as they develop. If you have any websites or books or publications or anything that you want to put in, we'll put them down there. Chris Fields, thank you for joining us and for giving us some insights into how relationships are viewed.
Yes, thank you. It was a great time, and I really appreciate you having me.
Thank you. If you like this kind of content, like and subscribe, and we will see you next time on Holding Space.